In this presentation, I'll explain what DOM is, why it is needed, how it is structured, and how it works with JavaScript, along with some practical examples. Document Object Model. The Document Object Model is a standardized model, which means it works consistently across different browsers and platforms. The DOM allows programs and scripts to dynamically access and update the content, structure, and styling of a web page in real time. One of its most important roles is acting as a bridge between web pages and programming languages like JavaScript. Without this bridge, JavaScript wouldn't be able to interact with HTML. The DOM connects three core web technologies, which is HTML for structure, CSS for styling, and JavaScript for behavior. What is Document Object Model? The Document Object Model is a hierarchical and logical representation of a web document. When a browser loads a web page, it doesn't work directly with raw HTML. Instead, it parses the HTML and converts it into a DOM tree stored in memory. Because everything is represented as objects, programming languages can easily read, modify, or remove parts of the page. This is what allows modern websites to be dynamic rather than static. When a web page loads, the browser performs several steps. First, it reads and parses the HTML code. Then, it creates a DOM tree, which is a structured representation of the page. Every element, headings, paragraphs, images, becomes an individual node in the tree. The DOM also provides an API which developers use through JavaScript to manipulate the page dynamically, such as changing text, styles, or structure. Some of the key characteristics of document object model are: the DOM has a few important characteristics such as it is platform and language independent, which means it works the same regardless of operating system or programming languages. It is structured as a tree, which makes it easier to navigate and understand relationships between elements. Most importantly, it supports dynamic changes, enabling interactive and responsive web experiences that update instantly without reloading the page. Why do we need DOM? So, without the DOM, web pages would remain static. There would be no immediate response to user or actions like clicks or form submissions. Real time content updates would be impossible without reloading the entire page. The document object model, or the DOM, solves these problems by allowing dynamic modification of HTML elements as well as dynamic modification of CSS styles, also event handling for user interactions, and seamless interaction with the user input. This is why DOM is essential for modern websites. Here are some example scenarios which are demonstrating DOM's power. First, when a user clicks a button and the text changes instantly, it is because of DOM manipulation. Also, during a form validation, when the user validates an input, either it passes or it shows an error without reloading, which is also DOM. When hovering over an element so that it changes its color or style, it is again DOM at the work. All these interactions depend on real-time DOM updates. Now, we'll discuss about DOM tree structure, the web's blueprint. The DOM represents a document in a hierarchical tree structure, similar to a family tree. At the top is the document node, which represents the entire web page. Below, it is the HTML element, which acts as the main container. Inside HTML, we have head and body, each serving specific purposes. Individual elements like headings, paragraphs, and divs form the lower levels of the tree. Every HTML tag written in the document becomes an element node in the DOM tree. So, this was all about the DOM tree, which tells us that how DOM represents documents in a hierarchical manner similar to the family tree. Now, we'll talk about the types of DOM nodes, which are also known as the building blocks of the web. The DOM is made up of different types of nodes. First, the document node. So, the document node represents the entire document and it is the entry point of the web page. Second is the element node, which represents HTML elements like divs, paragraphs, and headings. The attribute node represents attributes such as the ID, class, or style. The text node, which represents the actual text content inside HTML elements. For example, the text Hello World within a p tag. So, we can see a example which shows deconstructing a simple element. Here, the paragraph is the element node, the ID message is the attribute node, whereas Hello World is a text node. Now, we'll talk about DOM and its relationship with JavaScript. The DOM and JavaScript, both used together, are a very powerful partnership for our interactive web pages. It is important to understand that DOM is not JavaScript. The DOM is provided by the browser, not by the JavaScript language itself. JavaScript simply uses the DOM to interact with web pages. The process works like this. The browser loads HTML. After that, a DOM tree is created. JavaScript accesses and modifies the DOM. The web page is now updated dynamically using DOM, and using JavaScript, we can control its behavior while the DOM provides structure to the web page. At the end, we can conclude that it is a symbiotic relationship, as the JavaScript controls the behavior and logic of a web page, while the DOM provides structure and objects that JavaScript manipulates. Together, they create dynamic and interactive web experiences. Now, we'll talk about accessing DOM elements. To manipulate a web page, JavaScript first select elements. There are multiple selection methods. First is getElementById, which selects an element by its unique ID attribute. This is the fastest and the most direct method. Second, we have getElementByClassName, which returns a collection of elements that have a specific class name. It is useful for targeting multiple elements with a similar styling or behavior. Third, we have got getElementsByTagName. The tag name returns a collection of all elements with a given tag name. Example, all the p tags or all the div tags. Fourth, we have document_query_selector. It selects the first element that matches a specified CSS selector. For example, #myid, .myclass, and divp, and it is very versatile. At fifth, we have document_query_selector_all, which returns a static node list of all elements that match a specified CSS selector, which is ideal for bulk operations. At the left corner, we have got some code examples in action which tells us how we can access elements through DOM. Now, we'll talk about manipulating content and styles that bring us pages to life. Now, here first we have some text content, then HTML content, then attributes. Here are some code examples for content manipulation. So, after selecting elements, the DOM allows us to modify text element, HTML element, as well as some attributes. These changes appear instantly without page reloading. The DOM also allows CSS styling such as changing colors, backgrounds, or font sizes. This is commonly used for features like error highlighting, dark mode toggles, and interactive animations. Now, we'll talk about the DOM events. So, an event is an action performed by the user or the browser. Common events include clicking, hovering, typing, submitting forms, and page loading. Using event listeners, JavaScript responds to these actions. For example, clicking a button can trigger a function that displays an alert. Events are what makes web pages interactive as well as responsive. While we talk about events, we can also talk about how we can create and remove DOM elements dynamically. So, the DOM allows developers to create and remove elements dynamically. New elements can be generated using JavaScript and added to the page, while existing elements can also be removed when they are no longer needed. This is used for dynamic lists, notifications, pop ups, and modern UI components. Next, we are going to talk about DOM traversing and advanced concepts. So, DOM traversing means navigating between related nodes in the DOM tree. We can move up to parent nodes, down to child nodes, or sideways to sibling nodes. Traversing allows efficient access to related elements without repeatedly searching the entire DOM. So, this improves performance and enables context aware functionality. Now, we'll talk about why traversing is important. Traversing is important as it allows us to access related elements efficiently without resorting to slower research methods. It also helps to avoid unnecessary DOM searches, improving performance in complex applications. It also enables building dynamic and context aware functionalities where element relationships matter. Now, this is the end of this presentation, and to conclude, I think the document object model represents the web documents as a structured tree. It acts as a bridge between HTML and JavaScript and allows dynamic updates to content, style, and behavior. So, understanding the DOM is very essential for building modern and interactive web applications. Through this video, I hope you got some details or an overview about what DOM is and how it works in JavaScript. Thank you so much.